It was past midnight when I heard the knock. And when I opened the door, there she was, my neighbor, her eyes red from holding back tears. Her husband had just left town, and for some reason, in that moment, she chose me. It was close to midnight when I first heard it, a soft, hesitant knock at my door. At first, I thought I was imagining things. The building was always so quiet at night, with nothing but the hum of the pipes and the occasional creak of old wood. But the knock came again, this time a little firmer, carrying something urgent in it. When I opened the door, there she was. Elena. My neighbor across the hall. She was standing in the dim yellow light of the hallway, her hair loosely tied back, strands falling around her face. She wore a light cardigan over simple night clothes, but there was something about her presence that made the entire hallway feel charged. Her arms were folded close to her chest, as though she was holding herself together. And when she lifted her eyes to meet mine, I saw a rawness there, the kind that only comes after a storm of emotion. Elena? I asked, keeping my voice low, as if not to disturb the silence of the hour. Are you okay? She tried to smile, but it faltered before it could reach her lips. I didn't mean to bother you this late, she said softly. Her voice was uneven, threaded with exhaustion, maybe even hurt. I just didn't want to sit alone tonight. Something in my chest tightened. She wasn't the type of woman to ask for help lightly. At 42, Elena carried herself with a kind of quiet grace that made people admire her from a distance. Strong, composed, self-assured. But standing there in front of me, barefoot on the cold hallway floor, she looked fragile. The air between us felt heavy, filled with unspoken things. The faint smell of rain still clung to her, like she had been standing by the window or maybe had stepped outside before deciding to come here. I stepped back and opened the door wider. You're not bothering me. Come in. For a moment she hesitated, her hand resting on the doorframe as though she was fighting an inner battle. Then she nodded, her shoulders loosening just slightly as she crossed the threshold. The apartment was dim, only the soft glow of a lamp spilling across the room. She moved quietly, as though careful not to disrupt the peace of the space, and lowered herself onto the edge of the couch. I could see the way her fingers twisted together, restless, searching for steadiness. I didn't press her with questions. Instead, I just sat nearby, giving her the kind of silence that felt safe rather than empty. And slowly she exhaled, her voice breaking through the quiet. He left, she said finally, almost in a whisper. My husband, he left town tonight after a fight. Just packed his things and walked out. Her words lingered in the air, fragile and sharp at the same time. And in that moment I understood why she had knocked on my door, why she had come to me. Not because I could fix what was broken, but because she simply couldn't bear to carry the weight of her loneliness alone. And from that midnight knock forward, either could I. I remember how quiet the apartment felt after Elena spoke those words. He left. The kind of quiet that isn't empty, but heavy, filled with things unspoken. I didn't know what to say at first. What words could make the absence of someone she'd built a life with feel any less sharp? So instead, I did the only thing that felt natural. Let me make you some tea, I said gently. My voice was softer than usual, almost careful, as though if I spoke too loud the fragile calm she was clinging to might shatter. She gave me the faintest nod, her eyes glistening, and stayed where she sat while I moved into the kitchen. The kettle hissed as I filled it, the sound oddly grounding. I glanced at her while it warmed, and for a moment she didn't look like the composed woman I had always known. She looked smaller, curled into herself, one hand holding onto the blanket draped across her shoulders like it was the only thing keeping her steady. When the water boiled, I poured it over 2 mugs and added a spoonful of honey to hers, hoping the sweetness might offer some comfort. As I placed the cup in front of her, our hands brushed, just lightly, unintentionally, but the touch sent a ripple through me. Her fingers were cool, almost trembling, and when they lingered against mine for that half-second too long, I felt an ache I couldn't quite name. Thank you, she whispered, cradling the mug in both hands. Steam curled up into the space between us, filling it with warmth that words couldn't. We sat at the small table, shoulders angled just close enough that I could feel her presence. She didn't talk right away, and I didn't rush her. Instead, I let the silence breathe, the way you do when you know someone just needs time to find the courage to let words out. Finally, she sighed. It's not the first time, she admitted, staring into the swirling tea. He leaves, when things get hard. And every time he does, I tell myself I'll be fine. That I'm strong enough to handle it. But tonight, she stopped, her voice catching before she pushed forward. Tonight it just felt unbearable. Her honesty cut through me, not because of the pain in her words, but because of the trust it took to say them aloud. I could see how carefully she guarded herself, how she hated letting cracks show. And yet, here she was, showing them to me. I wanted to tell her something profound, something that could ease the ache I saw in her eyes. But all that came out was simple. You don't have to go through it alone. Her lips parted, like she wanted to argue, but then she closed them again. Her gaze lifted to mine, and for a moment she didn't look away. There was something searching in her eyes, like she was trying to decide if she could believe me, if she could lean on me without falling apart completely. And in that quiet, something shifted. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was trust. Fragile, tentative, but real. The hum of the kettle, the soft warmth of tea, her shoulder brushing lightly against mine as she leaned just a little closer, it all felt like the beginning of something neither of us could name. And though she hadn't asked for more than company, I knew in that moment I'd give her whatever steadiness she needed. The hours slipped by more quietly than I expected. Midnight turned into 1, and then 2, but neither of us seemed eager to end the conversation. There was something strangely calming about the rhythm of it, moments of soft words, followed by long silences that didn't feel empty at all. At one point, Elena shifted slightly in her seat, turning her body toward me as though she'd made up her mind about something. Her hands were folded around the cooling mug, but her eyes were restless, searching, carrying questions she wasn't sure she wanted answered. I don't really talk about my marriage, she began, her voice low, almost as if she was afraid the walls might be listening. People think we're fine. They see us together, smiling at dinners, hosting neighbors, they think we're perfect. She let out a faint laugh, brittle and humorless. But the truth is, I feel invisible most of the time. Like I'm just an accessory in his life, not a person he really sees anymore. I didn't know what to say right away. I watched the way her fingers tightened around the mug, the way her shoulders trembled even though she was trying to hold herself together. Finally, I spoke softly. You're not invisible. Not to me. Her gaze flickered up, startled by the honesty in my tone. For a moment, she just stared at me, her lips parting as if to reply, but no words came. Then she dropped her eyes back to her hands. She sighed. I shouldn't be telling you this. You're so much younger. You probably think I sound foolish, or I don't. I interrupted gently. My voice was firmer this time, because I wanted her to hear the truth in it. If anything, I admire you. I've always admired you. The way you carry yourself, the way you don't let life push you around. You're one of the strongest people I know. Her head lifted slowly, her eyes catching mine. And this time, she didn't look away. The silence between us grew heavier, charged with something I hadn't expected. Her breath hitched slightly, and for the briefest second, I saw the wall she always kept up begin to crack. Her hand trembled as she set the mug down, and I don't know what gave me the courage, but I reached out and laid my hand lightly over hers. Just a simple gesture. My skin against hers, warm and steady. She froze, but she didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers shifted, curling ever so slightly beneath mine, not holding, but not resisting either. When she finally spoke again, her voice was quieter, almost a whisper. I knocked on your door tonight because I didn't want to be alone. But also because, she paused, her throat tightening around the words. Because with you, I don't feel like I have to pretend. Those words lingered between us, filling the space like a soft, fragile flame. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about her husband leaving. This was about something deeper, about her longing to be seen, to be known, to be understood. And somehow, she had chosen me to see her. Not long after her confession, the night shifted. The quiet between us no longer felt fragile, but full, almost heavy, like the air right before a summer storm. And then, as if on cue, rain began to tap against the windows. Soft at first, then steadier, until the whole apartment was wrapped in the rhythm of falling water. The distant rumble of thunder rolled in, low and grounding, and I saw Elena glance toward the window, her expression flickering between distraction and unease. "Storms make me restless," she admitted, drawing the blanket tighter around her shoulders. She stood from the table and drifted toward the couch, her steps soft against the floor. I followed, not too close, but enough that I could be near if she needed me. She settled onto the couch, pulling her knees slightly toward her chest beneath the blanket. I sat at the other end, leaving space between us at first, respectful space. But in a room that small, with the storm cocooning us from the outside world, the distance felt unnatural, almost forced. After a while, she shifted, tugging at the edge of the blanket. Without a word, I lifted a corner and draped it over my lap, sharing it with her. Our shoulders brushed, just lightly, but the contact lingered like a spark. She glanced at me, the faintest smile tugging at her lips. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now, less burdened. The room filled with the little details that suddenly seemed louder than words: the hiss of the rain, the faint clink of our mugs when we set them on the table, the warmth radiating from where our bodies were almost, but not quite, touching. At one point, she leaned forward to place her mug down, and a strand of hair slipped free from behind her ear. Without thinking, I reached to brush it back. My fingers barely grazed her cheek as I tucked it away. It was the lightest touch, gone in an instant, but it sent something racing through me, something I tried to steady before it showed on my face. She didn't move away. Instead, she exhaled slowly, as though the contact had unraveled something knotted deep inside her. Her knee brushed mine under the blanket, accidental at first. But then it stayed there, warm and steady, as though she had decided, silently, carefully, that closeness wasn't something to be afraid of. We talked a little more, though our words came slower now, scattered between pauses that grew longer and longer. And each pause carried more weight than the words themselves. At one point, when laughter slipped between us, soft, unguarded, it faded into silence, and our eyes lingered on each other's just a little too long. The kind of look that says more than either of us dared to voice. The storm outside rumbled again, but it was nothing compared to the quiet storm building between us. And though either of us moved closer, either of us pulled away. We sat there, side by side, wrapped in the same blanket, wrapped in the same silence, knowing something had shifted, something we couldn't quite name, but both felt deeply. By the time the rain softened to a drizzle, the night had nearly given way to dawn. A faint silver light pushed at the edges of the curtains, casting the room in a softer hue. I thought, for a moment, that maybe we would sit there like that until morning, quiet, side by side, wrapped in the comfort of something neither of us fully understood yet. But then I felt it, the shift. Elena stirred, pulling the blanket a little tighter around herself as if she suddenly realized just how close we were. Her smile, which had lingered moments ago, faltered. And when she turned her head toward me, her expression carried something heavier, a shadow of doubt. "I should probably go," she said softly, though her voice sounded like it was trying to convince herself more than me. I straightened, not wanting to pressure her. "Only if you want to." Her eyes flickered to mine, and for a second, I thought she might stay. But then she shook her head faintly. "It's just this. Us. Sitting here like this, it isn't right." The words cut sharper than I expected, though I knew she didn't mean them cruelly. She looked down at her hands, her fingers fidgeting as if searching for something to hold on to. "You're 25. I'm 42. People would talk. They'd judge. And maybe they'd be right." Her honesty stung, not because of the words, but because I could hear the fear laced in them. Fear of being seen. Fear of what this could mean if it continued. Fear of wanting something she felt she shouldn't. I opened my mouth to respond, but she stood before I could. The blanket slipped from her shoulders and pulled on the couch, leaving me with the faint warmth of where she'd been. The air between us cooled instantly, like a door had been closed. I watched as she crossed the room, her steps careful, almost hesitant, as though each one was a small betrayal of the closeness we'd shared only minutes earlier. She stopped near the door, her hand hovering over the knob, but not turning it just yet. For a long moment, her back was to me. And though I couldn't see her face, I could see the way her shoulders rose and fell with her uneven breaths. I wanted to say something, anything, to keep her from walking out of that room with distance wedged between us. But the words tangled in my throat. Because maybe she was right. Maybe what I felt, the pull, the quiet longing, was something I wasn't supposed to feel. So I stayed silent. When she finally opened the door, the hallway light spilled across her figure. She glanced back once, just briefly. Her eyes held a storm of emotions I couldn't read, sadness, hesitation, maybe even regret. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Good night." The door clicked shut behind her. And in the sudden quiet that followed, I felt the ache of absence. The couch beside me felt colder. My chest felt heavier. And for the first time that night, I wondered if I'd lost something I hadn't even fully found yet. The apartment felt unbearably still after Elena left. I sat there in the quiet, the blanket still draped across the couch, carrying the faintest trace of her warmth and her scent. I told myself to let it go, to accept the boundaries she had drawn. But my chest felt hollow, as if something had been pulled out of me and carried across the hall with her. The hours passed in restless silence. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the look on her face as she stood at the door, that mix of fear and longing, as though she wanted to stay but couldn't let herself. By morning, I couldn't keep the words inside anymore. I crossed the hall, my heart pounding harder with each step, and knocked on her door. The sound echoed louder than I expected, and for a moment I wondered if she would even answer. But then the lock clicked, and the door opened just enough for her face to appear. "Elena," I said softly. She looked tired, her eyes rimmed with sleeplessness. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Maybe not," I admitted, "but I can't just stay quiet after last night." Her hand tightened on the doorframe. "This is a mistake. You'll regret getting involved in something like this." I shook my head. "No. The only thing I'd regret is not telling you the truth." Her eyes narrowed slightly, uncertain. "The truth?" I took a breath, steadying myself. "That you don't scare me. Not your age, not what people might say. I don't see you as someone who's too old for me, or as a woman whose life has already been written. I see you as Elena. The woman who makes me feel alive. The woman who makes me want to be better, just by being near her." For a long moment, she just stared at me, her lips parted as though she wanted to speak but couldn't. Then her eyes shimmered, tears gathering against her will. She lowered her gaze, shaking her head slightly. "You don't know what you're saying." I stepped closer, careful not to push too far, and gently placed my hand over hers on the doorframe. My touch was light, tentative, ready to retreat as she pulled away. But she didn't. "Elena," I said again, my voice steady now. "I know exactly what I'm saying. Last night wasn't a mistake. It meant something. To me. And I think it meant something to you too." Her shoulders trembled. For a moment, I thought she'd shut the door. But then her other hand lifted, slowly, almost uncertainly, and came to rest on mine. Her thumb brushed in a small circle over my skin, as though she was testing whether it was safe to let herself feel what she'd been holding back. When she finally looked up, her tears were sliding freely down her cheeks. But behind them, her eyes carried something else, relief, maybe even hope. "You make this sound so simple," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It doesn't have to be complicated," I replied softly. "It just has to be real." And in that moment, I felt her walls begin to lower, just enough for me to step inside the part of her heart she had been guarding so fiercely. When I stepped inside her apartment, it felt like the storm from the night before had followed us, not outside, but inside our chests. The air was heavy, fragile, as though one wrong word might scatter everything we had just confessed. Elena closed the door behind me slowly, her back pressed against it for a moment as though she needed it to hold her up. I stood a few feet away, unsure if I should move closer, afraid that if I did, she might retreat again. But then she looked at me. And this time, she didn't look away. There was still fear in her expression. I could see it in the way her jaw tightened, in the way her arms crossed over herself like a shield. But there was something else layered beneath it now, a softness. A quiet surrender to what she already knew. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered, shaking her head as though scolding herself. "I don't know how to let someone this close anymore." I stepped toward her, slow and careful, as though each step needed her permission. "You don't have to know," I said gently. "You don't have to figure it all out right now. We don't need to rush anywhere. We just need to be here. Together. That's enough." Her eyes shimmered, tears threatening to spill again, but she smiled faintly, a fragile, unsteady smile that felt more honest than any I had seen before. I reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. My hand brushed her arm, then slid gently down until my fingers wrapped lightly around hers. Her hand was cool, trembling, but she didn't let go. Instead, she clung to me, as though that simple touch was the anchor she hadn't realized she needed. We moved to the couch, not unlike the night before. But this time, there was no awkward space left between us. She sat close, so close that her shoulder pressed firmly against mine, her head leaning hesitantly until it found its place on my shoulder. The apartment was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rhythm of our breathing. Morning light filtered through the blinds, soft and golden, painting her face with a glow that made her look almost otherworldly. I watched the way her eyes closed, the way her lips parted slightly as she finally allowed herself to rest. I wrapped my arm gently around her, holding her without needing to say anything. And in that silence, I felt something bloom, not dramatic, not rushed, but steady, like the first warmth of sunlight after a long storm. For the first time, there were no words about what was right or wrong, no excuses about age or judgment. Just two people, weary from loneliness, finding solace in each other's nearness. I didn't know what the future would hold. Neither of us did. But I knew this: whatever people thought, whatever fears lingered, what we had in that moment was real. And as Elena's breathing steadied against my chest, I felt it deep in my bones. I wasn't alone anymore. And neither was she.